is that absolute value, and remember it's the two straight lines, the absolute value of a number is its distance from 0 on a number line. Okay? When you simplify inside an absolute value, it's always positive. The absolute value of -3 is 3 because it's 3 units from 0 on the number line. The absolute value of 4 is 4 because it's 4 units from 0 on the number line.
So it'll always be positive?
When you simplify inside absolute value, yes, it will be positive. It always has to be positive because it is a distance. All it's telling us is a distance. So then, sort of the first part of all this is just sort of remembering what absolute value means, because then it can help us to solve these equations. So, for example, would you agree that the absolute value of 4 is 4?
Yes.
Okay. 4, positive 4 inside those absolute value is 4 units from 0 on a number line, right? But also, would you agree that the absolute value of -4 is also 4?
Yeah. No. Yes, because you just said that it all has to be.
All has to be positive. So think about a number line. Let me just draw one on here real fast.
Oh, I comprehend.
Great. If we have a number line and we have 0, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. How many units is this 4 from 0? 4 units. That means its absolute value is 4. If I go this way, down to -4, how many units from 0 is this? 4. It's 4 units. Even though it's a -4, it's still 4 units. Its distance is 4. Which is why when we simplify both of these absolute values, we get the same answer. Do you see that? They're two different numbers inside, but when we simplify, we get the same answer. I think I have writing over here, so I'm going to erase this in a sec when you guys catch up. So the key here is to see that, look at inside those absolute value signs. We have two different numbers inside the absolute value sign. Do you agree? But we get the same answer as an output. So what that means for absolute value equations, when we see them in an equation form, is that there will be two possibilities for what our answer can be. Because a -4 has an absolute value of 4, and a +4 has an absolute value of 4. So the fact that the same number comes out as an output, as a simplified version, means that we can have two possibilities inside.
Does that mean infinitely many possibilities?
2. Just 2
Okay.
for now. So here's the key. What if I said to you, the absolute value of x equals 4? What could x equal? There are two things that, right. There are two things that this x could equal if its absolute value is 4. It could equal +4, and it could equal a -4 because they both simplify to 4, right? Are you with me so far? Well, you know because of what we just did. So because we said that, this 4 inside here gives us 4. Right? Absolute value of 4. But this -4 inside here, absolute value of -4, also gives us 4.
Yeah.
So then if I said to you the absolute value of x equals 4, what's x? Well, there's two things x could be. Either +4 or -4.
X equals positive or negative?
How would
Yes.
you find out if it was negative or positive?
You have
Well, we'll talk about that. You're a step ahead of me. I'm going very baby steps on this, just so that we can stay together. So do you guys see from here how now x could equal two things? X could either be +4, and that would be a true statement, or x could be a -4 inside that absolute value sign, and that would also be a true statement. Are you with me so far? That's the most important thing to understand about this, because that tells us why we do what we do. So x could either be 4 or -4 and make that statement of absolute value of x equals 4 correct. So there's two possible solutions to absolute value equations. Okay? And that's why. Okay. Ready to move on? This is also important, and this is what we were saying. When you simplify an absolute value equation, I'm just going to abbreviate it AV, absolute value, so we don't have to write it out every time. When you simplify an absolute value equation, the absolute value, when you have that by itself, absolute value, and it's all alone, there's nothing else on that side of the equation, you always have to simplify absolute value. It will be bigger than 0. And that's what we were saying. Like, it has to be positive. If you end up with something and it says like the absolute value of, x plus 1 is -2, there's no way that we can simplify an absolute value and get a negative number. So you have to watch for that. Absolute value can't simplify to anything less than 0. It can equal 0, but it cannot be a negative number.
If it's 0.
If it's 0, it's okay.
Okay.
But if it's a negative number, we have to say that there's no solution, because it's impossible.
So if it was like a equals -4,
Uh-huh.
there would be no solution.
If it said absolute value of a, if those absolute value signs equals -4, then you're correct. That would be no solution. No solution is what we would say.
So if anything of the variable goes to a negative, it's not going to be.
Yes, I'll show you. I'll try to show you. I will show you. Let me show you. Okay, I'm going to have you write the steps down. And I know that when we write the steps, it doesn't always make total sense. And that's fine. But then we'll have the steps for reference when we go back to do the problem. So write the steps down. Feel free to abbreviate as you want to as you go through these. To solve an absolute value equation, step 1, we're going to simplify so the absolute value expression is isolated. We're going to have just the absolute value on one side, and on the other side we'll have a number. And that number must be positive. Positive. Greater than or equal to 0. Or 0. Okay? Step 2. Because there are 2 possible solutions to absolute value equations, once we have it isolated, we split into 2 possible solutions, in 2 possible equations. We take away the absolute value signs. We make one answer positive and one answer negative. Because of that first slide, we had the absolute value of x equals 4. It could either be positive 4 or negative 4. So we split, give a positive possibility and a negative possibility, because inside those would both give us out the right answer. Stick with me. It's not going to totally make sense right now. Okay. And lastly, solve for each. Solve for each. Okay, and to solve, we use just our rules of equations that we've been using so far all year, right? Inverse operations, what you do to one side, you do to the other.
So you should have 2 answers for this.
Correct.
You should have a negative one and a positive.
Correct. You should, not necessarily a negative and a positive, but 2 answers. It kind of depends what's inside the absolute value that'll determine the sign of your answer. So let's look at how to do this. Use your steps. We'll go through each of these in our examples. Please note, after step 1, when we get that absolute value by itself, you need to ask yourself, does it make sense? And the key is, make sure it's not equal to a negative number. You cannot have the absolute value of something equal a negative. It will always be a positive. So you just need to stop there and ask yourself, before you keep going, does it make sense? If it's a negative, you're done. You can say there is no solution. But if it's a positive and it makes sense, then you continue on with your steps.
So if like a was equal, what
Yeah.
equation but it was like 3,
Uh-huh.
it was -3, there's no answer.
Correct. So if it said absolute value of A equals -3, that's not possible. We can't have an absolute value of anything simplify to be a negative number. It has to be a positive because it's telling us the distance on the number line. Okay? Let's look at example 1. So here's what it says. It says solve. It says graph the solutions on a number line. So we'll do both of these. But first we're going to solve. You don't need to write the directions. You can just say solve. Here's our first example. letter A, says x minus 4, or the absolute value of x minus 4, is equal to 6. The absolute value of x minus 4 is equal to 6. Now notice on this one, our absolute value expression is isolated, right? There's nothing else on that side of the equation on the left besides the absolute value expression, okay? So step 1, that is isolated. We don't have to do any more work right now. And we need to ask ourselves, does it make sense? Can an absolute value simplify to positive 6? Yes. So we can keep going because it's not a negative. Exactly.
So if you said x minus 4 equals negative 6, you could just stop there.
You would stop there and say no solution. Okay? But because it's a positive 6, yes, that is possible. Absolute value must simplify to a positive number. So now, here's what we do. We're going to, let me see how much I worked this. Okay. Not much. Okay. We're going to split the equation, and we're going to remove the absolute value signs. So I like to do it like this. I split it into 2. I remove the absolute value sign. Do you see how we did that on the left? Remove the absolute value sign. And we're going to set one possibility as positive 6 and one possibility as negative 6, because what this is saying is inside this absolute value, I could have a positive 6 that would give me this, or I could have a negative 6 that would give me 6 if I found its absolute value. So that's why we split it to possibly have positive 6 in here that would give me that answer, and possibly have a negative 6 in here to give me that answer. Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
It's kind of, right?
Sure, because the negative 6 that equals the variable is good, but if the variable equals negative 6...
Right. It is okay if your variable ends up negative. Because, is it okay to have a negative inside the absolute value sign?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the key. The negative can be in here. This is all fine to have negatives. You just can't say that any absolute value simplifies to a negative number. Right?
Yeah.
All right, makes sense.
Okay? So that's what we're saying. So don't let it be like, oh, we can't ever have any negatives. We just can't say that an absolute value simplifies to a negative. It can't. So we're going to split and solve for x. And we're just going to use our rules of equations to get x by itself. So if I start with my one on the left, to get x by itself, I need to add 4, right, to both sides. So I get that x could equal 10. And I can plot that over here on my number line. That's one solution at 10. And if I solve the other one, I would add 4 to both sides.
Solution.
Yes.
But the negative 6 isn't in the absolute value on that second one.
But look at how I removed the absolute value signs.
Yeah.
Tell me your question.
I thought you said the inside the absolute value sign is going to have a negative.
Yes, right. The key is that what I am saying here is that this quantity, x minus 4, this could either be 6 in order to give me this, or this could be negative 6 to give me this. So I'm saying this either has to be 6 or it has to be a negative 6 in here to give me this. Okay? Which is why we sort of split it. Yes.
So, x equals 10 would be the correct answer?
There's 2.
X equals 10 and negative.
Watch, I'll show you.
But I thought that you said don't.
But what am I saying? Am I saying that the absolute value equals a negative number, or am I saying that x equals a negative number? X. Okay, so stay with me. I'll show you. My other answer is x equals negative 2, so down here, right? If I plot those on a number line, those are my two solutions. Okay? Watch what happens if I check this. So we said there are two possible solutions to absolute value because we could either have a negative inside the absolute value or a positive. If I check this and I say the absolute value of 10, if I plug in 10 for x, minus 4 equals 6, right? Simplify. The absolute value of 6 equals 6. Is that true? Yes. Okay, so that was fine. What if I plug in a negative 2? This says negative 2 minus 4, the absolute value of negative 2 minus 4 is equal to, I'm going back to my original. I've got to be careful. When you check, go back to your original. I'm going back to this equation. The absolute value of negative 2, and I said x could be negative 2, minus 4 equals 6. So if I simplify, I get the absolute value of negative 6 equals 6. Is that true? Yeah. So do you see the difference? X can be negative, and the value inside the absolute value can be negative. When it simplifies, though, it must be a positive number.
So your answer for this would be negative 2 and 10.
Yes.
So like you
And
could,
so would you put the line and then 10 and then line and then line negative 2 and then line?
Here's what you would say. X equals 10 and
Okay.
negative 2.
could you put either one in it?
You have to put both. You have to put both because they both work, right? And so we have to say both. We can't say there's only one answer. There's actually two that work for this. So you must say both. Okay? Okay. So then I just want to show you the number line because it's kind of interesting. What do you notice about the number line? I plotted our two possible answers. What's the midpoint of these two numbers?
4.
Okay. How far is 4 from 10? 6. How far is 4 from negative 2?
6.
Okay, what do you notice about how that correlates to this?
Showing that A equals 6.
It will always be the distance. The absolute value will always be the distance from your answers. Right? Did you see how our answers were 10 and negative 2? You don't need to memorize this right now. I just want you to look at it and see this.
So since we have 10 and negative 2, what does the 4 have to do with anything?
It's just the center. It's exactly halfway between our two answers.
Like, what if you had like negative 2 and 11?
Then this wouldn't be 4. You'd have a different number there.
4,
4, yeah, probably, yeah. So I just want you to notice this because it will work this way every single time. The middle number will be what you're subtracting in the absolute value, and it will always be the same distance on either side, whatever that's equal to. Okay? Okay. Let's do one more, and then we'll probably be done here. Okay. I didn't leave much room. Okay, look at letter B. Look at letter B. Absolute value of 3x plus 1 is equal to negative 5. The absolute value of 3x plus 1 is equal to negative 5. Okay, so first we're going to copy that down. And then we look at our step 1. Step 1 says we want to isolate the absolute value expression. So we want the absolute value by itself. We don't want anything else on that side that we're adding or subtracting or multiplying. Is it by itself?
Yes.
Okay. Does it make sense? No. Okay, so this is one where if you kept solving this, it's going to be wrong. Because why? It doesn't make sense. We cannot simplify inside that absolute value and end up with a negative number. Do you guys see that? So you just have to be really focused on that so that you make sure you stop. And our solution here would just be, we would literally put no solution. We're done. Ella.
So basically, if it has a negative 5 or a negative number as the answer, just in the thing, then you should
Yes. As long as, just the caveat here, this has to be by itself. So your absolute value has to be the only thing on that side. Because pretend, what if I had something like this? Say I had a minus 10 on that side. Well, first I need to get the absolute value by itself. If I added 10 to both sides, then it becomes positive and I can keep solving. So once this is by itself, that's when you ask yourself, does it make sense? Can I keep solving?
I'm just having a little bit of trouble because I see the last one that it equaled -6 to get x equals -2 on that one.
Right?
But this one also has it equaling -5, but it's no solution.
Correct. When it equaled -6 was after we had already decided, oops, forgot that I was on the erasing tool. We had already decided this made sense. We'd already decided that. This makes sense, so now we can split.
Got it. So, yeah, okay.
So that your first step is to decide, can I keep going? This made sense? Yes. This does not make sense? Stop.
And big ideas, do you have to give both answers?
Yes. Yep. So if there are two answers, you must give both.
So you get half points if you only put one.
You're probably not going to have one. You're going to have two. Okay? Yes.
So we decided that the first one made sense because of the x minus 4, that is something minus 4 would equal 6. But if you did 3 times something and then added 1 to it, it would never.
So even like less specific than that. Anything inside an absolute value has to give you a positive answer.
Because the original equation, it will always equal a positive number.
Yep. Any absolute value has to be simplified to a positive number. So you get the absolute value by itself, and it has to equal a positive. If you get the absolute value by itself and it equals a negative, there is no
So
solution.
If that was instead of -5, if it was just 5,
Then we're good. Then we keep going.
Okay.
Yes.
So for the first one, how do you know to like x minus 4 equals -6?
Because you just take the opposite of this. You do it positive and you do its opposite. Always. We will do more practice on this, I promise. This isn't like the end. Okay. I think I'm going to stop there for today.